In the shadow of their ships, the earth forgot to breathe. The day they came, the sky turned into a mirror. Not the kind that showed faces, but one that reflected fear. The clouds stopped drifting. Birds didn't fly. Even the winds seemed to forget how to move. It was as if the whole world held its breath, listening to something too large, too ancient, too silent. No one saw their ships arrive. One moment, the sky was empty. The next, it was full. They didn't roar or burn like meteors. They didn't scream through the air like thunder. They just appeared. Thousands of them, hanging above every city, every ocean, every quiet corner of the earth. And they didn't move. At first, people thought it was a trick of the light, maybe a global illusion, a strange reflection caused by satellites. But the shadows they cast didn't lie. The ships were real. And they were vast, so vast that they covered whole horizons. Some were smooth and silver like melted glass, others dark and quiet, shaped like crescents or towers, or silent cathedrals drifting through the air. They didn't send messages. They didn't demand surrender. They didn't even make a sound. They just watched. In the small coastal town of Daria Point, a girl named Lena Rao stood barefoot on the black sand, her eyes lifted to the ship that hung over the sea. It looked like a floating continent, a piece of night carved into the day. She was 17, her hair tangled with salt, her face pale with disbelief. Her younger brother, Aaron, clung to her arm. "Lena," he whispered, "it's blocking the sun." She didn't answer. She just stared. The sea was calm, unnaturally calm. The waves didn't crash anymore. Even the seagulls were gone. Behind them, the world was falling apart. Phones rang endlessly. Sirens wailed. Governments shouted into the noise, trying to explain the unexplainable. But how do you describe something that doesn't belong in words? By nightfall, the power went out across half the world. Every machine that tried to look at them, every radar, satellite, or telescope went blind. Cities lost connection. Nations turned silent. And the ships didn't move. People gathered in streets, in fields, on rooftops. They prayed, screamed, sang, or simply stared. There was no sign of attack, no message, no beam of light, no voice from the heavens. Only stillness, a kind of stillness that pressed on every chest, that made it hard to breathe. Lena's father, Kiran Rao, a teacher who once taught her about stars, now sat by the radio, whispering to himself. "They're waiting," he said softly. "For what?" Lena asked. "For us," he replied, his eyes distant. "They're waiting for us to realize something." But no one knew what that something was. Days passed. The ships remained. The world began to change, not because of war or fire, but because of silence. Crops wilted without sunlight. Airplanes stayed grounded. Oceans stopped flowing normally, as if tides themselves were confused by the great shadows above them. Animals fled to the forests. Whales beached themselves in terror. The world had lost its rhythm, its heartbeat. Children asked if the sun was dying. Parents said it was just a passing event. But every day, the light grew dimmer, colder, weaker. And slowly, humanity began to forget how to live without the sky. In cities, people built temples under the hovering ships. In deserts, they built fires and sent smoke signals to the silent watchers. Scientists argued on dimly lit screens, trying to measure the immeasurable. Were they ships, or something else? Were they alive? Was it one mind, divided into thousands of bodies? No one had answers. But the strangest thing was this: no one could remember when they first noticed them. Everyone agreed they had appeared one morning, but no one could recall the moment before that. It was as if the ships had always been there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right time to be seen. Lena began keeping a notebook. She wrote down what she saw, what she dreamed, what she felt. "The ship over the ocean hums," she wrote. "Not with sound, but with thought. I can feel it sometimes inside my head, like it's breathing through me, like it's watching not with eyes, but with silence." Aaron would sit beside her, drawing the shape of the ship with trembling hands. "It looks like it's alive," he'd whisper. "Maybe it is," Lena replied. "Maybe it's dreaming." At night, she could see faint patterns of light moving across its surface, like veins pulsing, like the slow heartbeat of something enormous and patient. It wasn't human. It wasn't even mechanical in the way they understood machines. It felt ancient, older than Earth, older than stars. Across the world, fear turned into ritual. Some believed the ships were gods returning to judge humanity. Others said they were harvesters, waiting for the right moment to claim the planet. A few believed they were mirrors, showing humanity the shadow it had become. And maybe they were right, because the longer the ship stayed, the quieter the world became. Factories stopped. Cars no longer roared. Even the oceans grew sluggish. It was as if the earth itself had begun to hold its breath. 2. In Daria Point, weeks passed. The sea became darker, reflecting only the underbelly of the ship. People started leaving, heading inland, searching for sunlight. Lena's father refused to go. "I taught my students that the universe was silent because it was empty," he said one evening, his voice trembling. But what if it was silent because it was listening? Lena sat beside him, holding Aaron close. "What do you think they want?" she asked. "Maybe they don't want anything," he said. "Maybe they came because we called them without realizing it." "Called them how?" He turned to her, his eyes weary. "With every signal we sent into the dark. Every satellite, every message, every search for someone out there. Maybe they were always listening. Maybe we just didn't like what listened back." By the third month, sunlight was rare. The earth grew colder. Plants died. And still, the ships didn't move. A strange illness spread, not one of body but of mind. People started forgetting things. At first, small details, names, streets, faces. Then whole memories vanished. It was as though the world was being rewritten by silence. Lena noticed it in her father first. He began forgetting his lessons. He forgot the names of stars. He forgot why he had stayed behind. And then one day, he forgot her name. She cried silently as he sat by the window, staring at the ship, murmuring something over and over. "They're not outside," he whispered. "They're inside. They're inside us now." Aaron began dreaming of them. He'd wake in the middle of the night, sweating, eyes wide. "They're talking to me," he'd say. "In words I don't understand. They're showing me pictures of places that don't exist. Places that are cold and empty and full of light." Lena tried to comfort him, but part of her knew he wasn't imagining it. She could feel something too, deep inside, a quiet presence that pulsed like a heartbeat not her own. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she could see through their ships, endless corridors of light, walls like glass, shapes moving within them. And a voice, not sound, but a feeling whispering, "Remember who called us." By the fourth month, the last governments fell. Satellites went dark. The internet vanished. And humanity, for the first time in its long, noisy history, became truly silent. The earth no longer sang with cities, engines, or voices. The only sound was the low hum of the ships, resonating through the ground like a forgotten prayer. Lena began walking to the sea every morning. The tide was gone now. The ocean had turned still, reflecting the ships like mirrors. One day, she saw something strange, figures walking on the surface of the water. Not human. Not alien. Shadows. They moved slowly, as if they were made of light trapped inside darkness. They looked up at her, and for a moment, she felt as though the ship above was looking through them. She ran home, breathless. But her father didn't see them. Aaron didn't see them. Only she did. And that night, she heard the voice again. "The earth forgot to breathe when we arrived. But it was already dying long before we came." She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat by the window, watching the faint glow of the ship fade and reappear like the beating of a heart. It struck her then. What if the ships weren't invaders? What if they were mourners? Maybe they had come not to destroy, but to witness. To stand in silence as the last breath of Earth slipped away. To remember a world that once thought it could call across the stars without consequence. And maybe they were remembering something of their own, something older than time. One night, Lena stood by the water again, holding Aaron's hand. "Do you think they'll leave?" he asked. "No," she said softly. "I think they're waiting for us to remember something." "Remember what?" She looked at the horizon where the sun used to rise. How to breathe. By the 5th month, the world had grown used to stillness. No wind stirred the oceans. The air had become heavy, as though every breath was borrowed from something that no longer wished to share it. The trees no longer whispered, and the stars, when they appeared through the cracks between the ships, seemed dimmer, distant, afraid. Lena had stopped counting the days. The calendar on the wall meant nothing now. The seasons had vanished. The world lived under one long twilight, a half-light that never changed. People were different, too. Those who had not fled to the mountains or vanished into the deserts now lived quietly, moving slower, speaking softer. They had learned to live beneath the ships, not as defiant humans, but as creatures who had accepted that something far beyond them had claimed the sky. Lena and Aaron survived in what remained of their home near Daria Point. Their father sat by the window still, thin and silent, staring upward as if waiting for a message that would never come. Sometimes he would whisper to no one in particular. "The Earth's memory is fading," he said one evening. "They're taking it piece by piece, not the land but the meaning." Lena didn't understand, but she didn't argue. She had stopped arguing with the world. One night, Lena woke to a sound, not a real one, but something deeper. A vibration in her bones. She stepped outside, her feet sinking into the cold sand. The ocean shimmered faintly under the light of the hovering ship. It looked endless and near, both at once. Then she saw them again. The shadows on the water. They weren't walking this time. They were standing still, facing her, their forms flickering like candlelight behind glass. They didn't speak, but she could feel something, a pulse, a whisper, a memory not her own. She stepped closer. The water didn't move. Her reflection vanished. And then, in her mind, a voice like wind over a grave said, "You called and we came, but what you sought was not us. It was yourselves." Lena stumbled back, gasping. The figures faded, dissolving into mist. When she looked up, she saw faint streaks of light flowing down from the ship above, not beams, but threads, like spider silk connecting the air to the ground. They were reaching into the earth. By morning, she found the ground around the house covered with strange dust, gray, fine, and cold to the touch. When she brushed her hand through it, she saw flashes, images, like memories hidden in light. She saw cities burning, oceans rising, skies filled with smoke, not from the ships, but from humans. She saw the earth choking, long before the ships ever came. And then she understood. "They didn't make us stop breathing," she whispered to herself. "We already had." In the town's center, a group of survivors gathered around the old lighthouse. It had once guided ships through storms. Now it stood useless under the shadow of something far larger. People lit candles at its base, small flames trembling against the endless dark. Among them was a woman named Dr. Sarah Malik, a former physicist who had once studied deep space signals before the world went silent. Lena had met her once, when she came searching for a working radio. Now, Sarah looked thinner, older, but her eyes still burned with the desperate light of someone searching for reason. She pulled Lena aside. "You've seen them, haven't you?" she asked quietly. Lena hesitated. "The shadows." Sarah nodded. "You're not the only one. Others see them too, in dreams, in reflections in the water. They appear to those who still remember what we lost." "Why us?" Sarah looked up at the massive ship overhead, her voice trembling. "Because we carry what the earth can't hold anymore, its memory." That night, Sarah told Lena the truth, or what she believed to be truth. Before the world fell silent, astronomers had detected a signal, faint, ancient, repeating. It wasn't human. It wasn't mathematical either. It was organic, like a heartbeat encoded in light. When they amplified it and sent a reply, the signal had stopped. Weeks later, the ships appeared. But here was the strange part. The signal hadn't come from a distant star. It had come from Earth's upper atmosphere. Something had been waiting here all along, watching, hidden in the layers of the sky, perhaps asleep, perhaps listening. Sarah's theory was simple, terrifying, and beautiful. They are not aliens, she said. They are the memory of the cosmos. They come when a world forgets itself. Lena couldn't sleep after that. She lay awake beside Aaron, watching the faint blue glow that seeped through the cracks in the roof. She could hear it, the same low hum that had haunted her since the first night. Only now she realized what it was. It wasn't the sound of machines. It was breathing. Not human breathing, something deeper. The planet itself. It was as if the ships were trying to teach the Earth how to breathe again. Slow, deep, and patient. But humanity had forgotten the rhythm. The next morning, Lena found her father gone. His chair was empty, his notebook still open on the table. The last thing he had written was a single line. When they leave, we will not remember they were ever here. Outside, she found footprints leading toward the beach. She ran. When she reached the water's edge, she saw him standing at the shoreline, looking up. The ship loomed directly above him, so close it felt like it touched the sea. "Papa," she shouted. "Come back." He turned slightly, his face calm, his eyes full of light, faint blue light that shimmered like the reflection of stars. "They called my name," he said softly. "I remember now." Before she could reach him, the sea rose, not with waves, but with light. He stepped forward, and the water folded around him like silk. Then he was gone. Lena fell to her knees, screaming into the quiet sky that no longer echoed. After that day, she stopped writing. She didn't have words anymore. Only silence. And in that silence, something began to change within her. She started to see things, not with her eyes, but with something deeper. She saw the invisible lines that connected everything, the pulse that ran through rock, wind, and flesh. She saw how the ships were not objects in the sky, but part of that web, like lungs in a body too vast to comprehend. She realized then that the Earth wasn't dying. It was transforming. And maybe, just maybe, the ships were helping it remember how. Weeks passed. Aaron grew quieter. He spoke less, ate less, and began to draw strange symbols on the walls, circles, spirals, patterns that glowed faintly in the dark. When Lena asked him what they meant, he said, "They're the words they use to speak, not sounds. Shapes. They say the world is learning again." "Learning what?" she whispered. He smiled, his eyes unfocused. "How to dream." One morning, Sarah arrived with a group of survivors. They had been traveling north, following the direction of the largest ship, the one that hung over the Pacific like a black sun. "We think there's something beneath it," she said. "Something growing." Lena hesitated. "Growing?" Sarah nodded. "The land there, it's changing. Plants are coming back. The air feels different. I think the ships are repairing what we broke." Lena looked at Aaron, who had started humming the low, slow rhythm of the ship's pulse. She felt the same vibration inside her bones. "I'll come," she said. They traveled together, through cities half buried in dust, through highways cracked by silence, through forests that glowed faintly with strange blue veins. Everywhere they went, the world seemed half alive, half forgotten. And always above them, the ships. Some hovered close to the ground, others miles above, their undersides rippling like oceans of metal and light. When they passed beneath one, time seemed to slow. Their thoughts became heavy, their hearts slowed, and their memories flickered, as if the ships were touching their minds gently, reminding them of something they could not yet name. After many days, they reached the coast again, but not the Daria Point Lena remembered. This place was alive. Grass grew where ash had once fallen. The sea was luminous, glowing faintly in the dark. And above it hung the largest ship, vast enough to blot out the stars, yet strangely beautiful. Sarah fell to her knees, tears in her eyes. "This is where it began," she whispered. "And where it ends." Lena stepped forward, feeling the air thicken around her. The ground pulsed beneath her feet. She felt the same rhythm again, slow, steady, ancient. The ship was breathing, and the earth was breathing with it. That night, Lena stood at the edge of the glowing water. Aaron sat behind her, whispering the words of the shapes he drew in the sand. "Do you think they'll ever leave?" she asked him softly. He looked up at her with eyes that now shimmered faintly with the same light as the ships. "They won't need to," he said. "When we remember, they'll become part of us." Lena frowned. "Remember what?" Aaron smiled faintly. "The first breath the earth ever took." In that moment, she understood something she hadn't before. The ships weren't here to conquer, or even to save. They were mirrors, showing humanity the reflection of its forgotten soul, showing Earth the memory of its first breath, before smoke, before noise, before fear. And as she looked up, she saw the underbelly of the great ship shimmer, ripple, and then open like a vast flower of light. From it, shapes descended, not ships, not creatures, but waves of color, soundless and slow. They touched the ground, the water, the trees. Everything they touched began to glow, not with destruction, but with remembrance. Lena fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "The earth is remembering," she whispered. "It's learning to breathe again." The world glowed that night, faintly, like the breath of something waking after a long sleep. The air shimmered with unseen dust. The trees, the ground, even the broken concrete of old roads seemed to breathe, pulsing softly in rhythm with the ships above. It wasn't bright, not enough to light the world, but enough to remind it what light once felt like. Lena couldn't sleep. She sat by the sea, hugging her knees, watching the enormous ship that hung above the horizon. It pulsed like a heart, slow, patient, endless. Beside her, Aaron traced patterns into the sand with his finger. His small hands moved with strange confidence, forming spirals and circles that glowed for a moment before fading into the dark. "They said this is how the world used to speak," he murmured. Lena turned to him. "Who told you that?" He whispered, looking at the ship. "When I close my eyes, I can hear them, not with words, just feelings, pictures. They said the earth used to talk to the stars before we forgot how." Lena shivered, even though the air wasn't cold. "Talk? How can a planet talk?" Aaron drew one last spiral and smiled faintly. "Everything that breathes can talk, even if it doesn't use words." As the night deepened, more lights began to appear, drifting slowly from the sky, tiny orbs that looked like falling stars. They moved with purpose, settling over the land like soft rain. Wherever they touched, the ground brightened. Flowers that hadn't grown in years began to rise from cracks in the earth. Lena stood and reached out. One of the orbs floated toward her hand, hovering above her palm. It was warm, and inside it, she thought she saw something, a flicker of memory, a whisper of sound. For a moment, she heard laughter. Children. A park. A bright sun that no longer shone. It was the past, alive, breathing again in light. By dawn, the world had changed again. The survivors who had traveled with Sarah stood in awe, staring at the glowing landscape. Trees sprouted leaves of pale silver. Rivers ran clear for the first time in years. Birds, or something like them, circled high in the twilight sky. Sarah's face was wet with tears. "It's repairing itself," she said softly. "The earth is healing. They're using us, our memories, our thoughts, as a map." Lena frowned. A map to what? To what it used to be. The people began calling the phenomenon the remembering. Everywhere across the world, reports emerged from the few who could still send signals. Forests blooming overnight, deserts shimmering with rain, cities quietly turning to gardens of glass and moss. The ships hovered above them all, silent shepherds watching their work unfold. But it wasn't perfect. Some places didn't change. Whole regions remained gray, lifeless. Places where too much had been taken, burned, forgotten. Sarah believed those were the wounds that even the ships couldn't heal. "They need us to remember what used to live there," she said. "They can't rebuild what we've erased from our own minds." Lena realized then what the ships truly wanted. They didn't just come to heal the Earth, they came to restore its memory. And humanity, the ones who had forgotten, were the only ones who could give it back. One morning, Lena found Aaron standing knee-deep in the glowing sea. He was whispering to the water, his face calm, his eyes bright with pale light. "Aaron," she called. "Come back." He turned to her, smiling. "They're asking for our memories," he said softly. "They need us to remember everything, even the pain." She hesitated. "What happens if we forget?" He looked back toward the horizon where the ship pulsed like a living star. "Then the Earth will die in its sleep." That day, Lena went to Sarah. "What if we could help them?" she asked. "What if we could share what we remember?" Sarah nodded slowly. "I've thought the same thing. The ships don't take by force. They receive what we give freely. If we can open our minds, maybe they'll find what they need to complete the healing." "But how?" Lena asked. "We don't even understand them." Sarah looked up at the sky, her voice distant. "Understanding isn't the same as remembering. Sometimes, to save something, you just have to feel it again." That night, Sarah gathered the survivors near the coast. They formed a circle under the massive ship. Each of them carried something: a photograph, a piece of fabric, a book, a memory written on torn paper. Lena brought her father's old notebook. Aaron brought one of his drawings, the glowing spiral that never faded. Sarah spoke softly. "If the Earth is remembering through us, then we must become its voice. Don't think. Just remember. Every tree, every laugh, every mistake, every breath we ever took beneath this sky." They closed their eyes, and the ship responded. The air trembled. A low hum spread through the ground, deep and resonant, vibrating in their bones. The light around them brightened, not blinding, but warm, infinite. Lena felt her thoughts unravel, not vanish, but open. She saw flashes, the first time she learned to swim, the sound of her mother's voice, the smell of rain on old books. Then she saw things that weren't hers: mountains before roads, rivers before names, the first dawn reflected in oceans untouched by machines. It wasn't just her memory. It was the Earth's. The hum deepened. The ship above them glowed, and from its surface, waves of light poured down like breath, slow, rhythmic, alive. For the first time in months, Lena could feel the Earth breathing again. When she opened her eyes, the world around them was changing. The sea was no longer black. It shimmered with colors that shifted like thoughts: blues, greens, silvers. The sky above wasn't gray anymore, but a pale gold twilight, as if dawn and dusk had merged into one eternal moment. But something else had changed, too. The people around her. Some had fallen to their knees, their eyes filled with light, their faces peaceful, as if sleeping while awake. Sarah stood, trembling, whispering through tears. "They're connecting us, every living memory. The Earth is breathing through us." Then, as suddenly as it began, the light dimmed, the hum faded, and silence returned. Lena looked around. Some people were standing still, eyes closed, breathing in rhythm with the ships. Others had collapsed, their bodies still but peaceful. Aaron lay beside her, his small chest rising and falling slowly. She touched his face. "Aaron, are you okay?" He opened his eyes. They glowed faintly, like the sea. "I saw it," he whispered. "I saw everything." "What did you see?" He smiled softly. "The Earth's first breath." The next morning, the sky was clearer than it had been in months. A thin ray of sunlight broke through the spaces between the ships, striking the sea. It looked fragile, but it was real. People began to stir, blinking as if waking from a long dream. They looked different, quieter, calmer, as though something inside them had been rewritten. Sarah approached Lena, her face pale but determined. "The process has begun," she said. "But it's not over. The ships need more, not just memory, but forgiveness." Lena frowned. "Forgiveness for what?" "For what we did," Sarah said. "For what we forgot." Over the next days, Lena noticed something new. The ground beneath their feet began to hum softly, even when the ships were still. The rivers sang faintly at night. And sometimes, When she walked alone, she could hear whispers rising from the soil, voices of people long gone, speaking not with words but with feelings, sorrow, love, hope, regret. It wasn't haunting. It was healing. The earth was remembering through them. But not everyone accepted it. A group of survivors, men and women hardened by months of silence, began to fear the ship's influence. "They're changing us," they said. "They're making us forget who we are." Sarah tried to reason with them. "They're not erasing us, they're bringing us back." But fear grows faster than truth. One night, those who refused to believe gathered weapons, relics of a forgotten war, and aimed them at the sky. Lena ran to stop them. "Don't," she shouted. "You don't understand what they're doing." But they didn't listen. They fired. Missiles streaked upward, fire against silence. And for the first time since the day the ships arrived, the sky moved. The great vessel above them pulsed once, not in anger, but in grief. The light it released was soft, like a sigh. The missiles dissolved before they reached it. And then the earth shuddered. The air rippled. The ground cracked. Not in destruction, but in memory. The earth itself was remembering what it meant to break. Lena fell to her knees as visions filled her mind. Cities burning, oceans dying, the first machines tearing the soil. She saw everything humanity had done to the world, all at once. And then, beneath all that pain, she saw something else, a light that refused to die. Hope. The ship above her pulsed once more, and the tremor stopped. Sarah knelt beside her, clutching Lena's hand. "It's showing us mercy," she whispered. "It still believes we can learn." That night, the survivors who had attacked the ships vanished. No one saw them leave. Some said they were taken. Others said they became part of the earth's memory, forgiven, absorbed into its quiet heartbeat. Lena didn't know which was true. But when she stood by the sea again, she felt something she hadn't in months. Air that moved. A breeze. Small, fragile, but alive. She smiled, tears in her eyes. "The earth is breathing again," she said. Aaron took her hand, his voice soft and distant. "It's not just the earth," he said. "It's us." Morning came slowly now. Not as sunlight, for the ships still veiled most of the heavens, but as warmth, faint and gentle, filtering through the cracks in the sky. The air no longer tasted stale. The sea had regained its motion, small ripples rising and falling in rhythm with the faint pulse of the ship above. For the first time in months, Lena heard wind. It brushed through the ruins of Daria Point, carrying scents of salt and ash and something new, grass. Tiny shoots had begun to push through the broken roads, glowing faintly silver in the twilight. The world was not what it had been. It was quieter, older, softer. And yet it was alive. Lena and Aaron lived now among a small group of survivors near the glowing coast. Sarah led them, though she no longer called herself a scientist. She said she had become a listener. Each day, they recorded what the world remembered. When a tree grew where there had been none, they marked it. When rivers shifted their course, they wrote it down. It was as though Earth was rewriting itself from memory, not rebuilding what was lost, but rediscovering what it had always been. Still, not everyone understood the peace. Some felt uneasy beneath the silent ships. Some whispered that they had traded freedom for forgiveness. Lena didn't argue. She only watched. At night, she could still hear the low hum, deep and slow, the voice of the ships that now sounded almost like breathing. Sometimes she dreamed of them, vast, endless shapes floating between galaxies, carrying with them the memory of countless dead worlds. And in those dreams, she felt what they felt, sorrow and love bound together in the same rhythm. One evening, Lena climbed the cliffs beyond the camp. From there, she could see the ocean stretch endlessly beneath the largest ship. She sat down, her journal in her lap, and began to write. When they came, we thought they were ending us. But maybe we were already ending. Maybe they came not to destroy, but to remember us, so that something would remain when we were gone. She paused, staring at the horizon. The ship pulsed once, faint light passing through its body like a heartbeat. For a moment, She thought she saw something within it, shadows moving, like figures behind glass. Then a voice, soft and distant, filled her mind. "You remember now." Lena froze. It wasn't Aaron's voice, nor Sarah's. It wasn't human at all. It was vast, the kind of voice that didn't belong to one being, but to a million whispers speaking as one. "Who are you?" she whispered aloud. "We are what remains when the living forget," the voice said. "We are what worlds call when their names begin to fade." Lena trembled. "Why us? Why Earth?" "Because you remembered us first. You reached for the sky when the sky no longer wanted to listen. You searched for others while forgetting yourselves. So you came to punish us?" A soft pulse of light rolled through the ship. "No. We came to breathe for you. To remind you what breathing means." Lena's throat tightened. "And when we remember? Then we leave. And the world will no longer need us." She wanted to ask more, but the light faded. The voice was gone. She sat alone on the cliff until dawn, the hum of the ship still vibrating faintly through the ground, like the echo of something that had spoken through her very soul. The next day, Sarah found her by the shore. "You've heard them, haven't you?" she asked quietly. Lena nodded. Sarah smiled sadly. "So have I. They spoke to me last night. Said that what's happening now, this healing, is the end of the process. They're almost done." "Done," Lena repeated. "With what?" "With remembering us." Lena frowned. "What happens when they finish?" Sarah looked out to the horizon. "Then they'll leave. And when they do, they'll take everything that still forgets." That night, the sky flickered for the first time. The ships began to move, not leaving yet, but shifting, aligning into patterns like constellations reborn. Their light changed color from blue to gold, from gold to deep crimson. It looked like the sky itself was bleeding light. Aaron watched in silence, his face calm. "They're preparing," he said softly. "For what?" Lena asked. "To give the earth back its name." The next days were filled with strange dreams. People saw visions, oceans of glass, forests of light, endless skies whispering in languages they didn't know but somehow understood. They began remembering things they had never lived: ancient seas, creatures long extinct, mountains before they were touched by human hands. It wasn't madness. It was memory, the memory of the planet itself flowing through them. Lena felt it most strongly at night. Sometimes she would wake up crying, not knowing why. She felt every loss that had ever touched the earth, every species gone, every tree burned, every river poisoned. And beneath all of it, she felt the same whisper: "Forgive yourselves. And the earth will forgive too." One evening, Sarah gathered everyone on the beach. The ships above had begun to glow brighter than ever, painting the sea in waves of light. She stood before them, her voice trembling with awe. "They're leaving soon," she said. "But before they go, they're giving us a choice." Lena stepped forward. "What choice?" Sarah looked at her, and for the first time, Lena saw fear in her eyes. "Some of us will go with them." A murmur spread through the crowd. "They've opened paths," Sarah continued. "Not through space, through memory. They're offering to take part of us with them. The part that still remembers everything we've lost, so that it will never be forgotten again." Lena felt her heart tighten. "And the rest? Those who stay will carry the earth's new breath," Sarah said softly. "They'll rebuild, start again. But they won't remember any of this." That night, Lena sat with Aaron by the water. The air shimmered around them, filled with faint whispers, not sound, but thought. The sea itself seemed alive, glowing in slow pulses that matched the rhythm of their hearts. "Will you go with them?" she asked her brother. He looked up at the ship. His reflection rippled in the glowing water. "I think I already am," he said softly. Lena frowned. "What do you mean?" "I can feel them inside me," he whispered. "They show me things, stars, worlds, places where silence lives. They said the earth needs to forget, to live again. But someone has to remember." Lena felt tears fill her eyes. "You can't go. You're all I have left." He smiled faintly. "You won't lose me. You'll just stop needing me." The following days were filled with light. The ships began to hum louder, their glow spreading across the horizon. People across the coast began to fade, not die, not disappear, but dissolve, like the edges of a dream upon waking. They became light, merging with the sky. Sarah was one of them. Before she went, she placed her hands on Lena's shoulders. "You'll remember enough to begin again," she said. "But when they leave, the world will forget the shadow of their ships." Lena wanted to speak, but no words came. Sarah smiled once more, and then she was gone, her body turning into a mist of golden light that rose into the sky. When it was Aaron's turn, he didn't look afraid. He stood by the water, staring at the vast ship that had watched over them for so long. Lena ran to him, clutching his hand. "Please don't go." He looked at her, really looked, his eyes full of the same calm light she had seen in the sea. "I'll be part of the sky," he said softly. "When you look up, I'll still be here." And then, slowly, gently, he let go. His body shimmered, and then dissolved into streams of light that rose into the ship. Lena fell to her knees, crying silently as the sky pulsed in answer. For a moment, she thought she heard his voice, faint, fading, but peaceful. "Breathe, Lena. Just breathe." Days passed, or maybe weeks. Time no longer moved the same way. One morning, Lena woke to silence. The hum was gone. She stepped outside. The ships were still there, thousands of them, but they were dim, their light fading. One by one, they began to lift, ascending slowly through the clouds. The earth trembled softly, not in fear, but in release, like a long sigh after holding breath too long. As the last ship rose beyond the clouds, the sunlight broke through for the first time in months. It spilled across the ocean, across the land, across Lena's face. And she breathed. Deeply. Freely. As though the world had exhaled with her. She wrote one final line in her father's old notebook. "They came not to take, but to remind." And when they left, the earth remembered how to breathe again. That night, under the clear sky, a real sky, she lay on the sand, staring up at the stars. There were no ships now, no shadows, no hum. Just silence. But in that silence, she felt them, faint, distant, patient. Watching, not from above, but from within the light of the stars themselves. And she smiled. "In the shadow of their ships," she whispered, "the earth forgot to breathe. But in their memory it learned again." The days that followed were soft and quiet, like the hush that follows a long storm. For the first time in a lifetime, the sky was blue again. Not the pale, bruised blue that used to hide beneath smoke and ash, but the deep, endless color of beginning. Lena woke each morning with sunlight on her face. The world felt empty, yes, but not broken. Everywhere, the land shimmered with traces of what had been touched by the ships. Forests glowed faintly silver at dusk. Rivers ran clear, whispering like voices half-remembered. Even the ruins seemed gentler, as though the earth had forgiven them. No one spoke of the ships anymore. Those who had not vanished, those who had stayed, lived as though waking from a shared dream they couldn't quite recall. They remembered that something immense had happened, something that had reshaped everything, but the memory itself was gone, like a word erased from a sentence that still made sense. Lena, however, remembered everything. At night, she sat by the shore, listening to the faint hum that still lingered beneath the waves. It was not the hum of the ships, not anymore, but something else. The breathing of the earth itself, steady and deep. Sometimes, she thought she saw light flicker beneath the ocean, shapes moving, slow and graceful, like memories learning how to swim. And she would whisper to them, though she didn't know if they could hear. "Are you still there?" No answer came, but the sea shimmered softly, as if nodding. The survivors built small towns along the coast, not cities, not monuments, just homes. They grew gardens, learned to fish again, to read the stars, to live without asking what the future would demand of them. It was a quiet rebirth, fragile and humble. Lena became a teacher. She taught the children how to listen not to words but to silence. She told them stories about the stars, though she never mentioned the ships. Sometimes she would pause in her lessons and ask, "What does the world sound like when it breathes?" And the children would close their eyes, listening to the waves, the wind, the rustle of leaves. Then they would smile. Years passed. Seasons began to flow again. Rain returned to places that had been dry for decades. Animals emerged from the forests. The air smelled of life. But Lena never stopped waiting. She often walked alone to the cliff where she had last heard her brother's voice. The ocean stretched out beneath her, vast and endless, glowing faintly in the light of twin moons. And every now and then, when the wind blew a certain way, she thought she could hear him. "Breathe, Lena. Just breathe." One morning, she awoke before dawn and saw something strange in the sky, a single streak of light, rising slowly from the horizon. It wasn't like the ships that had once hung heavy and vast above the earth. This light was smaller, gentler, like a falling star that had changed its mind halfway through its descent. It hovered above the ocean for a long moment, then began to descend. Lena felt her heart stop. She ran to the shore, her feet splashing through the shallows, her breath caught between fear and wonder. As the light touched the water, it unfolded, not into metal or shadow, but into something living, something made of both memory and light. It wasn't a ship, it was a seed. The seed floated before her, glowing faintly gold. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat, and within it she saw glimpses, faces, shapes, stars, all woven together in a tapestry of memory. She recognized some of them. Sarah, Aaron, and others, people she had thought lost forever, now drifting within the seed's glow like fragments of dreams waiting to be reborn. A voice, soft and familiar, filled the air. "Lena." She froze. "Aaron." "We kept our promise," the voice said gently. "The earth remembers now. But so do we. We are the memory she no longer needs to carry." Lena fell to her knees, tears filling her eyes. "I miss you," she whispered. "You never lost me," Aaron said. "You only learned to live without me. That's what life is, breathing even after the stars go quiet." She reached out, touching the glowing surface. It was warm, not like metal, but like sunlight on skin. "This is our gift," the voice said. "The seed of memory. When planted, it will grow into something new, a bridge between remembering and forgetting." Lena frowned. What will it become? A forest of light. A place where the earth and the stars meet again. The voice began to fade. "Plant it where the first breath of the world still lingers." Then the light dimmed, and the seed fell softly into her hands. Lena carried it carefully through the morning mist, past the cliffs and down to the valley where the first river had returned after the ships departed. It was a place of quiet rebirth, grass swaying in gentle wind, water singing against smooth stones. The air smelled of beginnings. She knelt by the riverbank, dug a small hollow in the earth, and placed the seed within it. Then she covered it with soil and waited. Nothing happened at first. But then, a faint pulse. The ground trembled slightly. A thread of light broke through the earth, twisting upward, dividing and expanding until it became a small tree, translucent, shimmering, its leaves made of light that flickered softly like breathing stars. Lena watched, awestruck. The tree grew slowly, roots spreading across the soil, connecting to the water, the air, the stones. And with each breath she took, it glowed brighter, as though her heartbeat was feeding it life. When the first wind passed through its branches, she heard whispers again. Not from the ships, not from the sky, from the earth. "We remember." Word spread. People from the nearby towns came to see the shining tree. They called it the heart of breath. They built small homes around it, but no walls, no gates, only gardens and open paths, so that wind could pass freely. They said that as long as the tree glowed, the world would keep remembering how to live. Lena spent her days beneath it, writing in her notebook, not stories of sorrow or loss, but of balance, of how forgetting was not the same as losing, and how remembering was not the same as holding on. The earth had taught her that. One evening, as the sun sank low, she sat under the tree, listening to its soft hum, the same rhythm that once filled the sky. The air shimmered, and she felt a familiar warmth beside her. "Aaron," she whispered. A faint light formed at her side, the shape of her brother, smiling softly. "You did it," he said. "You planted memory." Lena smiled through tears. "Are you free now?" "We're part of everything now," he said gently. "The ships, the stars, the breath of the wind. We don't need to watch anymore. The earth knows how to breathe." She reached for him, but her hand passed through light. "Will I see you again?" "You already do," he said. "Every time you breathe." The light faded, not gone, just becoming part of the air again. Lena sat beneath the tree for a long time, the sound of the river and the whisper of the wind weaving together into something like a lullaby. Years passed once more. The world healed. Forests spread, seas calmed, skies filled with new birds whose wings glowed faintly in moonlight. Humanity lived quietly, humbly, remembering that the world had once stopped breathing and had learned to start again. Lena grew older. Her hair turned silver, her hands soft with time. But her eyes still carried the same starlight she had once seen reflected in the ships. One night, when the moons were full, she walked alone to the shining tree. The air was calm, the sea far below shimmering like glass. She lay down beneath the branches, the light of the tree falling across her face. Her breath was slow, steady. She smiled. "In their shadow we forgot," she whispered. "In their memory we remembered." And then she closed her eyes. The tree's light brightened, not with sorrow, but with peace. Its leaves shimmered, each one glowing like a tiny ship drifting through the night sky. And when the dawn came, the tree's light spread across the valley, across the rivers, across the world. For the first time in forever, the earth did not just breathe. It sang. Epilogue. The sky that remembered. Centuries later, travelers stood where the valley had once been. The shining tree had grown into a forest, 1,000 trees made of light and memory. They called it the forest of first breath. And when the wind passed through it, people said they could hear the voice of an old woman whispering among the leaves. "Breathe. Remember. Begin again."